we officially have a bride, the wedding can begin. If anyone has a cell phone, please turn it off now or please turn it to vibrate so this way there are no disruptions during the ceremony. And welcome to the wedding of Dan and Jana. We're all thrilled and excited to be here, especially me. When you drive 85 miles an hour and 55 when there's no street lights, it's a miracle that you arrived here. So before we begin the actual ceremony, I'd just like to explain exactly what is going to happen now. One of the most interesting things that you will see from the very beginning is that we are under the wedding canopy or the chuppah. And one of the most interesting things about it is that it is open on all four sides. And one of the reasons why it's open on all four sides is that it is supposed to represent the tent of our foremother, the original foremother, which was Sarah. She was married to Abraham. And one thing that they practiced and that they worked on throughout their lives was chesed, which is kindness. And they had an open home for everyone. Anybody who wanted to come in, anybody who was a traveler was invited into their home, was fed, was taken care of, was given a place to sleep for the night. And so to speak, their home was open on all four sides. So to represent that at the night of the wedding and on what is going on, the traditional way to get married under this chuppah, to start the marriage off in the correct way, is to remember our forefather, our foremother, the way that they led their lives, and how they were so kind and caring and giving. And that is why we stand here under this chuppah. There's a story that I would like to share with you, which I think represents Dan and Jana very well. There was a woman, her name was Leah, and her mother was in the hospital. She was very, very ill. And what she noticed is that if she wasn't in the hospital, no one would give her mother the type of care and concern that she really needed. When she would buzz for the nurses, it would take them 10, 15 minutes before they would come. And she really, truly felt so bad for her mother. And after a few months, her mother finally succumbed to the illness which she had. And she said, you know what, I want to do something in memory of my mother. She says, my mother was such a great person. My mother was such a wonderful person. She says, it's very hard for me to be in the hospital all the time to help people like her who have difficulty having people who are there to help them in their time of need. She says, but I could start and do something else. What she decided to do in Brooklyn, New York, the organization still exists, is that she decided that anybody who is in need of meals because they cannot get to a grocery store if they cannot get out, or they're ill or they are sick, she would set up an organization where you call and meals would be delivered to the people's homes. One day, she receives a phone call from a woman who was a helper in her organization and said, I'm really sorry. She said, today was my day to cook for this woman. She's about 94 years old, and she's a Holocaust survivor. So she says, not a problem. She says, I will pick up the meal for you. She says, thank you so much. He said, we'll swap days. You'll cook Thursday, I'll cook Tuesday, and you can deliver to this woman. She says, perfect, just give me the address. She gets the address, and she goes, and she knocks on this woman's door, and she hands this woman the meal. The woman says, thank you so much. And she says, you look a little bit familiar. She says, I don't think we've ever met before. You don't look familiar to me. She says, is your name Leah? She says, yes. She says, my name is Leah. She says, how do you possibly know my name? She says, is your maiden name Castenbaum? She says, my mother's maiden name, yes, was Castenbaum. She says, how do you know all this information about me? She says, you look just like your mother. She says, okay, I do look a little bit like my mother. Agreed. She says, I want to let you know that in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, I was 16 and your mother was 12. She said, your mother was all alone because unfortunately her parents were killed. She says, I took care of your mother every single day for 4 years. She says, I used to feed her part of my rations of bread every single day so she could stay alive. She said, before, when our camp was liberated, before we left and before we parted ways after these 4 years, your mother said to me, in a million years, I will never ever know how I can ever repay you or how we will ever cross paths again. She said, but somehow, some way, I need to repay you and I will find a way to repay you. She was repaid on this day by her daughter delivering the meal to her after all of these years. And after not knowing each other, even though they lived in the same area of Brooklyn, not bumping into each other, not seeing each other, that promise was repaid. And that's how far kindness can go. Kindness can repay debts that have taken place many years before. Kindness is something that we all agree is a wonderful concept. but when it comes to practice, many times we often fall short. And that is why a wedding begins this way, with this chuppah, with this canopy, is that your home, Dan and Jana, should be a home of kindness. It should be a home of warmth. It should be a home where everyone is welcomed in. And knowing the two of you, as long as I know everybody is welcomed in. And it's a home where the beginning of marriage is based on something that is so strong and so deep, which is the giving and caring about others, which will help you build your marriage, because if you can care about others, you can certainly care about yourselves. And that is why the chuppah and the ceremony begins in this very way. So at this point in the ceremony, I am now going to explain the next part of what Jen is going to do. She is going to circle Dan 7 times. The reason why she is going to circle Dan 7 times while I sing a song that introduces her to the wedding is because when the Jewish people left slavery from Egypt after 210 years, what happened was that they followed God into the desert blindly. And God said, I'm going to take you to the land of Israel. And it took them a while to get there. It took them 40 years. But after those 40 years were over, God now said, I promise you, I guarantee you, I'm going to give you this land called Israel. And the first battle that the Jews were supposed to fight was in the city of Jericho, the city of Jericho. And God said to them, you don't need to do anything. He said, you go around this city 7 times, circle it 7 times, and I will make these people fall into your hands. And if you look in the books of the prophets, that's exactly what happened. They listened and they trusted into the word of God, and they encircled the city 7 times, and the city fell into their hands and they captured it. So the idea of circling Dan 7 times is what Jenna is going to do, is the idea of that. It's faith. They love each other, they believe in each other, and marriage being the next step on this journey together is filled with a lot of unknowns. But they love each other, and that love shows their faith that they're willing to take the next step in their journey, just like the Jewish people followed God blindly into the desert, not knowing what would be, not knowing what the future would behold. And that's what Jana shows now. In addition, by circling Dan, she shows that now Dan is the center of her life. That now family is what comes first. She may not agree fully, but at this point, her life belongs to somebody else. It's not just her own. And Dan's life belongs to her. And without any further ado, Mrs. Landesberg and my wife can escort you around. Brucha haba mi vansiach shoshan chochem mahavas kala misos dodim hu yivarech esechason v'yes hakalahu yivarech esechason v'yes hakalahu. So if Jen is not dizzy enough, or too dizzy enough to continue, we'll now explain the next part of the ceremony, which is that every single Jewish custom, in its beginning, revolves around wine. We begin every Sabbath, every holiday, we introduce it with the Kiddush, the recitation that we make over wine or grape juice, which enters us into that either Sabbath or holiday. And on this auspicious occasion of a wedding, it is also introduced into how we begin. And the idea as to why wine is chosen as opposed to any other beverage, it's a very interesting and unique idea. Wine, as we know, comes from grapes. Grapes, in and of itself, is nowhere near as expensive as wine. You could have wine that is worth thousands of dollars. You will never ever find grapes that are worth thousands of dollars. The uniqueness of a grape is that the item itself is not as precious and is not as valuable as what it produces, which is the liquid which is inside of it. And as we enter into this ceremony and we enter into this marriage of Jana and Dan together, the message behind the wine is that you two are individuals right now. But the greatest things that you as individuals can do is what you produce in the future. And what comes from you in the future. Whether it's experiences you share, whether it's different types of jobs or different ways in which you impact people's lives. Obviously, the idea of the ultimate of what you could produce is children, and that's symbolized by wine, is that the actual person themselves is valuable, but what a person can produce is even more valuable. So we are now going to recite the bracha, recite the blessing over the wine, and before we do this, I would also like to call our two witnesses who are going to watch and make sure that Dan faithfully carries out his mission to marry Jana, Mr. Frank Berger and Mr. Dave Krieger. They're going to come up, we're going to recite this blessing, and we are going to officially begin the law aspect of the marriage ceremony. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al harayos v'yasar lanu es kol harusos v'hitir lanu es hanasuos lanu al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh amo Yisrael al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin.
Help Jana with her veil so she can drink. You take a sip. It's white wine, don't worry. Yeah.
At this point in the ceremony is the official law aspect, the halachic aspect in Jewish law, where Dan and Jana are actually married to each other. Dan is going to place a ring onto Jana's finger. But what's very unique about this part of the ceremony is that the ring has no diamonds on it. It has no engravings in it. It is completely plain. And the reason why this ring is plain as opposed to, let's say, an engagement ring, which could be very expensive, as opposed to any other type of wedding ring which may have stones, diamonds, or types of engravings, is that we want to show that under this holiest place of the chuppah, when Dan and Jana are getting married, their love is not dependent on money. Their love is not dependent on the type of ring you give to somebody else. Their love is not dependent on an inscription. It's that their love shows you more than any words can describe to another person. It's a love that comes and emanates from the heart. It's not something that you could put down on paper. It's not something that you could purchase at a store. And it's something that no amount of currency can buy. And that is why this ring is completely plain at the time of the ceremony, in order to show that their love is based on one thing, which is true love, and not any ulterior motives. Okay, at this point, our two witnesses will come and verify that this actually is a ring.
Can you see it?
No.
Yeah, Jason, I don't know if my brother has it.
Okay, we gotta get it.
Jason,
We're still verifying that this is a ring. I saw a CVS down the road, so need be, quarters work. Okay, 288 Kedushin. Okay, our two witnesses, Mr. Dave Krieger and Mr. Frank Berger, to the exclusion of everybody else, have now verified that this ring is in fact an actual ring. It is valid for the marriage ceremony. And Jenny, you're a lefty, correct?
Yes.
So please put out your left hand and your index finger, and then you will repeat the following words after me. Hare.
Hare.
A. Mikudeshes.
Mikudeshes.
Li.
Li.
Batabat.
Batabat.
Zu.
Zu.
Kedas.
Kedas.
Moshe.
Moshe.
V'Yisrael.
V'Yisrael.
And you may put the finger on her on her left index finger. There you go. That's the index.
now you're married.
Excellent. Just keep it there.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point in the ceremony, I'm now going to read the marriage contract that Dan was witness to. This marriage contract requires him to take care of Jana faithfully. It requires him, whether he likes it or not, he signed off for financial support of Jana. I don't know if they've already switched over the credit cards into her name, but this is what you have now signed over to. So you were there, you saw the witnesses sign it. Can't go back now. באחד בשעה בשישה בעשרים יום לחודש מרחשוון שנת 5,776 לבריאס עולם למניין שאנו מניין כאן בושקיל פנסילבניה. ובין שמעון בן רב זב חיים אמר לו להודה בסולטה חי ישראל בס חיים שמואל הבא לאנטו קדש משה בישראל ואנה אפלח ואוקר ואיזון ופרנס יסיחי לפי גהלפס גוברן יודעים דפלחן ומופרן Besonnen und Farnossen und Scheen bekuschte wie Ahibna Leifi, Mahar Besulaifi, Kesef Zuze Mason, der Chaze Leifi mit der Reiso, und Mesonaifi, wie Kisusaifi, wie Sipukaifi, Meala bei Saifi, Kaira Kal Aradius, Kol Arad Svias, Maras Kai Israel Besulta, Tahaba Habas Leila into Bedon, the Dunya, the Nahalas Lemi Bei Abuha, Bain Bekesef, Bain Bezal, Bain Betashitim, Bemai de Lavusha, Beshimushe, Dira, Beshimushe, the Arsa, Hakol Kiva of Reuven Shimon Chasandanan, Bemeas Kukim Kesef Tzuruf Utzvi, Reuven Shimon Chasandanan, Behosef La Min Delay, Od Meas Kukim Kesef Tzuruf Aferim Kenegam Sach Hakol, Masayans Kukim Kesef Tzuruf Akach Amar, Reuven Shimon Chasandanan, Afrayish Dark Sivasa. Doni Dunya Bedin, the Scepter, the Kabbalis Alai, the Al Yarse, Israel, his Parami, Kol Shvar, Arag Nissen, Bekinyonim, the Islay, the Fus, Kol Shemaya, the Knoibus, the Asid, Anal, the Mikna, Nifsen, the Islahon Achrayas, the Leislahon Achrayas, Kulhon, Yahon Achrayan, Arbayan, Lefro, Minhon Stark, Subsa, Doni Dunya Bedin, the Scepter, the Minai, the Afiluman, Galima, the Al Kasfai, Bachaya, Basar Chaya, Min Yaima, the Dona, no Olam Achrayas, Vachomer Stark, Subsa, Doni Dunya Bedin, the Scepter, the Kiba, of Ruben, Shimon, Chasandanan, Vachomer, Kol Starik, Subos, with the Scepter, in the Hagam of Bnas, Israel, Hasuyin, Katikon, Vachmenu, the Loka, Smakta, the Loka, Toyfse, Starik, Bernisu, Min Ruben, Shimon, Ben Rav Zeb Chaim, Chasandanan, Lamaras, Chai, Israela, Bas, Chaim, Shmuel, Besulta, Da Al Kolma, the Kosev, Meforish, the El, the Mana, the Kosher, the Maknaya, Bei HaKol, Shor, Bakayim, Neum, David, Yaakov, and Avram, Yosef, HaKohen, Eid, Neum, Ephraim, Shalom, Ben, Yitzchak, Shimon, Halevi, Eid. At this point in the ceremony, we are now going to enter into our next part, which is 7 blessings, 7 brachos that we wish upon a newly married couple, such as Dan and Jana. And most of these blessings deal with many of you in the crowd, that tonight we are going to dance with them, we are going to enjoy with them, we are going to sing with them, and we are going to fulfill a very, very big mitzvah, a very big Torah commandment, which is to gladden the hearts of the bride and the groom. And that's why we're all here, is for them and to rejoice with them. But there's one, before I recite them, that I think is a beautiful one, which doesn't talk about the wedding. It's the only one of the 7 that is not specific to the wedding itself. And it says that you should rejoice with the bride and the groom, but it's the only one that calls them, in Hebrew, what's called Re'im Ahuvim, friends. It's the only one that also doesn't mention as much that they are a bride and a groom, but friends with each other. And if you look at the different commentaries on this bracha, what they explain about this blessing is as follows. They say marriage is wonderful, and marriage is great, and it's such a high point in life, and it's such an amazing point in life. But 1 week from now, 2 weeks from now, that atmosphere, that feeling cannot be recreated again. You may still feel really fresh and renewed as a married couple, but what keeps you going in life, what keeps your marriage fresh, is the fact that you're friends with each other. And the fact that day in and day out, they're the person that you want to wake up next to. They're the person that you want to see every single day. They're the person that when you're at work, you're thinking of them. They're the person that at night, they're the person that you want to see. And that's what Re'im Ahuvim is. It's best friends. Is that you are marrying someone who is your best friend. Someone who through thick and thin, because in life, there are difficult times. There are times when the days are not great. And there are times when there are difficulties such as sickness, even worse for illness, days which are just tough in the office in general. But you always know that you have your friend at home, this person at home to pick you up. No matter what the day brings you, no matter what happens during a week, no matter what happens during a month, or what happens during a year. This one singular blessing focuses on not the marriage itself, but everything that comes with it afterwards. And for you, Dan and Jana, my blessing to you is that the joy that you have on this night and the happiness that you have on this night should be something which extends to you as long as you both live, that this loving and caring that you have for each other is not something that you just keep for yourselves, but you spread to those around you, and that you make everyone else just as happy as both of you are right now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol baruch lechodo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer ha'adam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yatzar es hadam b'tzalmo b'tzelem demus tavniso v'hiskin lanu mimenu binyan adayad. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ha'adam. Sos tasis v'sagelo akaro b'kibutz b'nei l'socha b'simcha. Baruch atah Adonai mesameach Tzion b'vaneha. Sahameach tesamach reim ahuvim kisamecha yitzircha b'gan eden mikedem. Baruch atah Adonai mesameach hason v'kala. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baras oson v'simcha chason v'kala gilori naditza v'chedva hava v'achva v'shalom v'reyus meheir Adonai Eloheinu yishma b'yarei Yehuda u'v'chutzos Yerushalayim kol sason v'kol simcha kol chason v'kol kala kol mitzalos chasanim mikol basam u'nar mishtei meginasam. Baruch atah Adonai mesameach hason im hakala.
Dan's gonna drink, and then you're gonna help out Jana. Not yet. When I let you know. Not yet.
Okay, we are now up to the last part of the ceremony. And the ceremony is concluded in the most appropriate way, which is that it doesn't make a difference who gets married. It doesn't make a difference what type of occasion it is. It could be a bar mitzvah, it could be a bat mitzvah, it could be any type of party. There is always a remembrance that our celebration, no matter how many friends and family are here, is not complete, and it never could be complete, because we do not yet still have the temple in Jerusalem, the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. And no matter what type of happy occasion we have, we always must remember and we always must think that this is not the ultimate and this is not the truest joy that one could possibly experience until the times when we actually have our temple back, our Beis HaMikdash back. So I'm now going to just say a short prayer, followed by which Dan will break the glass. The breaking of the glass that is by his foot, if you can see, symbolizes that as happy as we are, there's still something which is shattered, there's still something which is broken in our hearts, because our joy cannot truly be complete without the temple in Jerusalem, without having a full place of worship that is recognized and that there is not bloodshed and fighting over. We still wait and hope for that day, but unfortunately that day has yet to still arrive. So hold off for 1 second.
I'll rush the Simcha